guys love, and that is we are doing a bit of this. So I'm very pleased to welcome into the studio Simon Poland from Evaluagent. Si, how you doing?
I'm all right, Martin. How are you? You okay, mate?
I am good, thanks. I've got to start though. Your favourite Christmas present, because you've been backstage, haven't been able to join in.
I know I've been dying to type in what it was. It got me thinking, actually. I probably had two. One was a very cheap and cheerful boxing bag that you used to punch, but it was one that was on a stand and you'd punch it and it'd swing back at you. That was quite a good one. But I'd have to say, probably the first PlayStation. That's got to
Nice.
be the best one.
I thought you were going to say an Everton shirt.
No. That curse happened many times before my first Christmas. But yeah, let's not go there today.
My nana got confused once. Opened up what I thought would be a Tottenham shirt, and it was a Coventry away shirt.
Is that funny? I am obviously a massive Everton fan. When I went to live in South Africa, the Man United and Liverpool are huge out there. So when they hear my accent, they're like, "Oh, Si, you Liverpool fan?" I'm saying, "No, I'm an Everton fan," and they used to just burst out laughing. Just laugh at me.
Yeah, that's
almost out of pity, I think.
I think we're in the same boat. Being a Tottenham fan, that was often the response. Now, before we get going, let me just catch up on some comments. Look, Danny and Rob are going to have a Star Wars-a-thon. Beano and Dandy annuals from Spencer got the entire collection from the 80s. Wow, it's not just a shrine, it's a fortress of nostalgia. Yeah, still talking about lightsabers, Rob and Danny. Oh, thank you very much. Moz Isley Cantina. You'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. And Danny has a comment for you, Si. First PlayStation, damn, I'm old. I remember getting an Ace-Tronic MPU 1000. That sounds like something out of Star Wars.
I don't even know what one of them is. I won't ask. I'll ask after the session.
Me neither. I think that's just, I'm older than Danny though, so God knows. I do remember a Spectrum 48K. Anyway, what are we here to talk about? And this kind of started when we were talking about CC Expo, wasn't it?
It did, Martin, yeah. And I'd like to get your views on that. What's your thoughts now after, I think it was 2 weeks ago, CC Expo. What's on reflection, what's your thoughts on how went the talks, etc.?
I mean, I love the Expo. It's played a key part in my career. I can remember going as a team leader. If I think back to then, and this might just be my memory warping it, right? I can remember there was more variety of talks. So there were talks on training, even though it might not have been called well-being then. There was a lot of talk. There was many talks about the people in the contact center, or QA, or WFM. Whereas I think this year you only need to look through the speakers list and it was predominantly AI. And that's not to poo-poo AI, because it's great that our industry is at the forefront of it. But I don't know. I didn't get a chance to see as many as I wanted. But I think it can be a bit bamboozling, overwhelming. Everyone's talking about it, and I think if I were, and that what was good, I do think, was there seemed to be a lot more operations people, like the end users, so heads of contact center managers, probably more team leaders than I've seen there for a few years. So overall, I think it was great, but probably predominantly, perhaps you could say, too much on AI.
Yeah, that was sort of my reflection as well, Martin. I completely agree with you. I had a load of great conversations with a lot of end users, a lot of operational and delivery people there, which was fantastic. But I did come away thinking, if I wasn't in the mix of doing some of this stuff day in, day out, would I be overwhelmed by it? wouldn't know where to start. And there was some good messages there. The themes from the talks that I certainly went to. Making sure you've got your use cases nailed down, making sure that you're engaging the right stakeholders very early on. Me and Rob done this talk quite a while ago on our contact center advisor week for Evaluagent. But I think there was some themes there that come out. But I did think, it could be overwhelming, which ultimately sparked this conversation, really, didn't it? And the overarching thing for me is it doesn't really need to be. It doesn't need to be overwhelming when you think about AI and automation. And there is some opportunities to what I like to call dip your toe in. And hopefully we can have some good conversation on that today.
Well, yeah, and let's take this to something that was being a key part of my career. It's what you're involved in now, and that's QA.
Mhm.
And just that kind of, it doesn't need to be overwhelming. I'm going to drive for you, so let's get up a couple of slides just about what you are going to be talking about now. And I would welcome fire in any questions for Si. I will share your comments. If you can move away from Star Wars, Rob.
Sure, no problem. And I think, just elaborating on that, Martin. I do believe there is a simpler starting point. If we just reflect back to where our industry was, before the massive sort of inflection point of AI. I read a stat probably 12 months ago that 50% of contact centers globally still went on the cloud. I'm not sure what that stat is now, but we have that, and we have many talks, myself and Rob, with prospects and existing clients each week, and they're still got spreadsheets for QA, and there's still a number of opportunities with QA. Sometimes they're mixed with continuous improvement, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're mixed with MI, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're part of the support service function, sometimes they're not. Some contact centers don't have QA, they'll have the team managers doing it. And it just got me thinking that it could be overwhelming, and there is a simpler starting point if you are at that stage, really, and you're still doing spreadsheets, or you've got an in-house built tool that you're doing your QA on, and then you're having to take that data and manipulate it to then surface and report it back into the business.
I think if you were at the expo and your QA and a lot of your MI is still on Excel, and I know from my time in QA that was still a sizable proportion of people were collecting their results, certainly in Excel, of their QA activity. If you were sat in the audience listening to one of the talks or going around and seeing a lot of the vendors, you might be thinking, God, this is miles away from where I'm at. How are we ever going to get there? And that's what led to this sort of conversation. Shall I move you on, because you've displayed this very well visually?
Yeah, so that's it. And the first thing that comes to my mind if I sit in that person's shoes is like, wow, we're only doing like 1% maybe of our contacts, like, and everyone talks then about auto QA and 100% quality monitoring and words and phrases like that. And whilst that's all well and good, and there's fantastic benefits that you can get from that, Martin, no doubt. As I say, there's an earlier starting point that you can dip your toe into and iteratively, move up the curve, and that's ultimately what I've sort of put on the screen here. These are mine and Rob's thoughts jotted down, really. But if you're still on spreadsheets, you're still only doing 1% coverage. You don't have to accelerate all the way to 100% auto QA straight away. It will take a lot of effort. First of all, a lot of mind shift change, but the best thing that's happened with AI and some of the use cases that they talked about at the CC Expo is conversation intelligence, and that's the bit really that I think unlocks this starting point for everybody. Regardless of what software you've got. Pretty much everybody now has got a CCAS platform, what a call recording platform. And, if you've got a piece of software that you can take them contacts and transcribe them if the calls, or you can, if they're in digital, you've got that text. Then a lot of software companies now do offer some elements of conversation intelligence, and that's really where you can start to drive significant benefit for your business. And it's really powerful, and that's really where you can start to dip your toe in without getting overwhelmed. You can start to look at things like just sentiment. Let's look at the agent side of the conversation. Let's look at the customer side of the conversation, and then let's look at overall. You can start to, have a little look at that versus your scorecard results.
And I think something you said there is critical, isn't it? Which is, it's got to be a mindset shift that you're not necessarily, and even if you don't use, let's say you've got a team of people doing QA, perhaps to start this journey, you take one or two of them, or a small percentage, to get them to look at this, because the mindset shift really is about from just the completion of activity for the completion of activity's sake, up to let's find out some stuff that's going to make what we do better, help our team members develop, and deliver a better customer experience for our customers. That isn't always necessarily going to come from whether someone did or didn't do something at the right time. It's got to be more evolved than that.
It does, and as you know, Martin, conversations have got more complex with the rise of digital transformation and the rise of self-serve. So, there's, again, I think it was Contact Babel or someone like that. There's an AHT graph that shows AHT that's gone up significantly over the last 10 plus years. So conversations are more complex, and that's really where using the starting of conversation intelligence, sentiment, generative AI summarization of the call, and things like that, you're getting a really good feel of how them conversations have gone. And that's really where to start. Have a bit of intrigue, have a bit of curiosity, and then just compare that to how you've scored a really good conversation, a really bad conversation. You start to get a feel of the type of efficiency gains that you can then drive. And I'd almost call them like low hanging fruit. You can drive some significant efficiency gains across your contact center just by dipping your toe in this conversation intelligence space. So you're still doing your manual QA, but you're using some of these metrics that come with conversation intelligence and come with some of these software platforms that we've now got at our fingertips to drive improvements. And one of the best things I was told around auto QA and conversation intelligence is just think of the bell curve. If you think of your contact center performance for your customer service operation, it should go like this. And about 60% of your performance is generally going to be okay. So how can you leverage this conversation intelligence, sentiment, and some other metrics, which we'll come on to in a sec, to look at the shoulders of that performance? What are your high risk contacts and conversations, and what are your high value? If you can focus on them straight away, you can still do manual forms in your platform that you've got, but you've driven a significant improvement by finding these high risk, high value conversations.
Could you start with looking at vulnerability, for example?
Of course, yeah. Of course, you could look at triggers of vulnerability, triggers of confusion and frustration. Also, then on the flip side of that, which is really important, looking at how the agents handled them conversations, how they controlled the conversation. I'm a massive advocate of agent ownership and the associated soft skills that go with that, such as providing the assurance, providing timelines, summarizing and playing back the conversation at the end before you close it. Things like that, which are all traditionally part of a QA scorecard, potentially can actually be surfaced up via conversation intelligence as well. And that's across 100% of your conversations, which is really powerful. One of the things that we like to do when we're having conversations and networking is show like filter and sentiment. So if you look at like low customer sentiment, for example, and high agent sentiment alongside other topics such as confusion and frustration, that sort of indicates to you that the agents probably tried quite hard in that conversation to do what they need to do. You can start to tie other elements into that, such as CSAT, effort, XMPS, MPS scores, etc. And it helps you service up your policy and your process issues. So where the agent probably didn't have the autonomy to actually handle that call to the sufficient resolution, but you can see, the agent sentiment's really high, the customer sentiment continue to be really low, and then you've got these other elements that you're looking at as well. So again, not really needing to delve into 10, 20, 30 questions on a scorecard. It's getting a really good view of the types of conversations and then the volume that qualify against their metrics and conversations as well, which is then really powerful. And that's really where you get your first efficiency gains. You start to look at them high risk, high value contacts. You're surfacing up, a lot of the time, issues and failure demand in your business that potentially your business doesn't know about. Or a lot of the time, the business has got an indication of what's going on. They know there's some challenges on them query types, but they can't articulate the volume. So you're able to surface back the volume, and that can help you in all sorts of ways, Martin. Help drive change, help reprioritize change, which is really powerful as well. And this is all before you get to full auto QA. It's dipping your toe in the water, but biggest skill set isn't technical. You don't need to be overwhelmed. It is intrigue and curiosity. That's the biggest
I love
one.
that. I love that. You start with being curious rather than being focused on an output, a quality score, a percentage coverage. Just get curious about what's actually going on. And you've shown in this slide how you then can take these steps, right? So conversation and intelligence, and then can you just talk quickly to 3 and 4? What do those mean in summary?
Sure, no problem. So just before I move on to 3 and 4, there's another element of on number 2 that you can then start to look at. So when you start to build these high risk, high value filters using your conversation intelligence, another couple of metrics that are really powerful more for voice are overtalk and silence. So the stuff I've just talked about for agent ownership, etc., confusion and frustration on the customer side, vulnerability, where there's large periods of silence and large periods of overtalk, that can also indicate that there's a knowledge gap, or there's the agent's not being able to control the call, or there's signs of vulnerability on the customer side as well. So them metrics are part of conversation intelligence, and you can use that to leverage finding your high risk, high value contacts. And once you've got that, the second efficiency gain you can get is the what we call the workflows, or the automation of then distributing evaluations to your evaluators. So at the moment, typically, if you're on spreadsheets in that level 1, you have to go through your call recording system, find calls of a certain length. We've all been there, and you basically just dip check and cherry picking calls ready for evaluation. 5 per agent per month, the typical number. Don't really need to do that anymore. You've got these high risk, high value contacts, and you can build filters, and you can just push them automatically and unbiasedly through to your evaluators to evaluate. So still doing that manual scorecard, but you can probably do that much deeper now, because you've got this sort of conversation intelligence, first line of assurance, that's told you typically how that conversation's gone, and you can drive that, which is sort of the second part of that level 2. And then, when you're getting really competent and efficient at there, and the business has started seeing the real value, and you've started cutting away at that low hanging fruit, that is ROI for your business, you can move to 3 or 4 then, and that's where you start to leverage, that auto QA element, using conversation intelligence at a more advanced level, building bespoke topics and line items for your scorecard, looking for specific things within the conversation, within a query type, etc. So we call this in our business, we call this configurable conversation intelligence. So using either a generative AI prompt or AI enhanced text analytics.
But I guess you only want to progress once you felt comfortable with what you're finding from that second stage, right? Because you don't want to suddenly go, we follow pretty static scorecard. We doesn't really matter where you put the results, but let's say they're in Excel. You don't want to go from quite straight lines all the way through to multiple queries and thing. You've got to start. This is why this is nice that you're going right. Try this. Get curious around this. Then you can start as your team become more comfortable and competent, and they're driving some real insights into the operation. Then you can then go to like the 3 and 4.
Exactly that, because you've started servicing and driving some of that value, which naturally then brings more questions, which means you can go deeper into that, which is where the configuration comes in and the automation of the scorecards then. And again, a lot of the conversations we have, a typical scorecard that was done at level 1 going into level 2 on this chart, you're stripping out about 20-30% of that anyway, because conversation intelligence is giving you a lot of the indications there, used through sentiment, overtalk, silence, and your summarization and resolution. You can strip out some of them from your scorecard, and that's where your scorecards then, when you go into automation, can be quite bespoke to your line of business, and can go deeper into what you're trying to find. So typically, when you get into that level, you're looking at specific things, specific behaviors, which drives first contact resolution, for example, reduces repeats, reduces transfers into other departments, how you're controlling that conversation. And even then, if you want to go a level further, particularly for our financial service colleagues, how you look at the CX journey with multiple contacts, and how you use, and leverage automation and on auto QA to see the holistic QA journey against them particular contacts. So, there is a lot of activity then that you can go up to 3 and 4.
But it's interesting, and it's interesting for teams. If we move on to your final slide, before you get into that, I have got some questions from people. Spencer says, fascinating discussion, Simon Poland. How can SaaS platforms use AI-powered conversation intelligence and automated QA to ensure accessibility compliance, especially for disabled consumers, given the challenges of working with vulnerable communities and the difficulty of implementing effective scoring, as I experienced while working with an insurance company?
I think there's a number of things that you can unpack through that question. It's a great question. I think obviously the accessibility and the platforms got to be really forefront in your mind. So the user interface for somebody who's maybe hard of hearing, for example, user interface has got to be up to the relevant standards, up to the relevant accessibility criteria, so that it's available for everybody. And then on the flip side, if somebody who's got sight issues, etc., making sure that it's got features and benefits in there, so that they're able to listen to the things within the platform to be able to drive it. So the functionality from an accessibility point of view is really important, and I think there's still inroads as an industry we need to do there, particularly as AI and conversation intelligence is moving so fast. How can we chat to people like the guests on here and Spencer, etc., to be able to make sure that they're considered in the platforms?
And there's another question, and you won't be surprised. You and Pete could probably talk for about 4 days non-stop. Pete Dunn of BPA. I'm consistently amazed at how many companies I talk to who still score a 0 or 1 on QA maturity, but also have no viable alternative providing ad hoc MI, BI, or regulatory oversight.
It's a really good question, Pete, and one that we've tried to resolve over the last several months, particularly in Evaluagent, and one that I've been stung with in previous roles. So in previous roles, when I lived in South Africa, I was running and managing big operations we didn't have speech analytics or conversation intelligence then, but we had to drive, significant contact reduction. So being able to take the data that we did have from our CCAS platform and being able to put advisors into quintiles, so into 5 sections based on first contact resolution performance, was really powerful for us to be able to drive the right conversations. And Pete makes a great point that a lot of people don't have that maturity even at that 0 to 1 scale. So one of the things that I would suggest your listeners check in their platforms is being able to extract your data. Make sure your data is not being held to ransom. So you might have a CCAS platform, for example, where you are at the 0 to 1 level, but you're getting an element of sentiment. You're able to see silence. You're able to see hold. Them types of metrics. How are you knitting them to your other operational performance to be able to drive improvements in your contact center? And that is why the QA team and the support services teams need to be working more tightly together, because the power of some of the stuff that the QA teams have that MI probably aren't aware of is a really powerful conversation, a really powerful partnership to be able to drive the right data visibility for improvement. So, for example, what we've done is we allow customers just to extract the data via CSV for any date, any time, for ad hoc quick analysis, but also via API so that they can push it into their own data warehouses to knit with it with their other data. So that's just one example, but yeah, definitely would make sure if people are thinking about going on this journey and dipping the toe in, they've covered that MI element off, and they've almost done a maturity assessment on their organization of where they're at from an MI point of view as well.
And there's again from Spencer, Pete Dunn, is surprising, isn't it? Many companies seem to be stuck at the basics of QA maturity, which is what you were saying, Si, while still lacking viable solutions for ad hoc. It highlights a major gap in both processes and tools that could help them move forward. But this is actually good news, really, in a way, in terms of what's possible, right? It's opportunity, isn't it?
It is. And again, when you're looking at the data that you can take out, if you're dipping your toe in just this conversation intelligence space, you might only have 6 or 7 metrics that you're looking at across all of your conversations at first. That's quite easy just to put in a box, have a rigid structure around your data and be able to push that in consistently. You're not being overwhelmed with hundreds of line items from 10, 15 scorecards that you need to add in, and making the data quite complex at that point. You're going up the maturity curve and giving yourself time and space to become competent and understand that data at a level before you start to move up the curve. Because again, typically if we go through into the auto QA journey, we support clients going through that with our experience, and sometimes we have to have conversations around, we need to actually not do a lift and shift. It's a lift, shift and transform of that scorecard, because like I said earlier, we strip 20-30% of it out because we've got conversation intelligence, but then we're asking the hard questions. Do you really need that? Do you really need that question in your scorecard? It's quite subjective in its question.
People get very protective of their scorecards.
Yeah. And I come at it from a place of vulnerability. I just like to be curious, and I really like the conversations with customers and prospects when they can, they're really passionate, they can justify why that's in there, and that's great. And then if you almost go, well, have you thought about using this metric instead, because actually this metric can give you X, Y, and Z. A lot of people actually go, you know what, you're making me think a little bit differently about how QA and auto QA scorecards work, and how they're going to be used in the future as well. Because again, with the advancement of AI and conversation intelligence, I can only see the types of functionality and the tools that we have from a QA and an insight perspective, making it even easier, making it even more accessible. I see with agentic AI and the AI agents coming in, do you need to ask 20, 30 questions on your scorecard? Is there a couple of questions, and then you've got, like in ChatGPT, where you can just type in what your question is and it surfaces up the insight and the analysis for you? Is that where we're going to be heading in the next 12, 18 months? that's probably a different conversation altogether.
Well, I think even before all the great things that you guys are doing, you know, I've always been, especially after being in the QA world, I've always been a champion of trying to let people know your QA team is your turbocharged engine that a lot of people haven't even turned on. So now there's even more opportunities of making that work properly, because it's often the unused, you know, the unused team, or they just do the output. They're not the team that people go to and go, right, we need to improve X, Y, and Z, or can you tell us about what's happening here? Now there's even more great intuitive tools and understanding that will enable companies to do it so much better. Now, it wouldn't be one of our shows without Rob using his catchphrase, and I think you'll like this, Si. Rob is replying to Spencer. I think the tools exist, but many companies are still early in their maturity, and that doesn't change overnight. It takes time, and we're still relatively early. You're right, though. There are still too many companies not adopting when they could. And there it is, banana rama syndrome. And it's interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting what you were saying, Si, around it sounds like in some instances you actually kind of slow people down. Their desire to be at number 4, for example, is unrealistic.
Yeah, and one of the final points I'll say is, you know, 100% QA or also QA in their mind is probably, it's probably like what I'm talking about with conversation intelligence. Conversation intelligence is across all of your conversations. It's just, you know, a specific finite amount of metrics that you use to find them high risk, high value conversations. And ultimately, if you're doing a QA scorecard at 1% coverage, people just think, oh, well, I'll just automate the scorecard and put it across everything. It's not really where you need to start. You know, starting in the conversation intelligence and then building that up so that actually the scorecard that you've got is adding significant value is where you can go. So you're absolutely right there, Martin.
Well, look, Si, Rob has shared your latest guide that everybody could download. Thanks so much for coming on. I would recommend everyone connects with Simon, because I know you were quite happy to talk about this, and as is your way, you guys are not about selling your kit. You're about kind of evolving the conversations, and as you've shared already in this section, right, there's stuff that people could do from what they have right now that could make us better overall as an industry. So thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
Stay tuned, because maybe you could get this. This could be one of your Christmas presents, the Laurent Perrier Rosé.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I will. I'll be staying tuned trying to win that. Don't you worry about that. Thanks for having me, Martin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.